let's call the meeting to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Boyd,
Here?
Oldbeck,
Here.
Palachian,
Here.
Hatwick,
Here.
McNary,
Here.
Roper. Here. Simmons.
All right, item number 2, meeting minutes. These are meeting minutes from August 27th. Are there any comments or changes to the meeting minutes?
No, I move to approve the meeting minutes.
A second? All those in favor? Any
I'm
opposed?
abstaining,
Abstaining?
because I
Okay.
wasn't here.
One abstain. Question on the meeting minutes. Wasn't there one that we couldn't vote on last month? Didn't we vote on one and had to hold another because we didn't have?
Oh, I think maybe we
I
were
think we
waiting
got
for
'em.
Robin.
Yeah,
I
then
think
We
that
got
was
it?
last
Okay.
month.
We got them, right?
But we ended up getting them under unscheduled because
That's right.
Robin had a.
That's right.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, on to item number 3, the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
I move we approve.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is moved forward, approved, sorry. No items on the consent calendar, no continued matters. On to commission item A, please.
So this time I included some photos to help discuss further the Fresno trolley cars. This photo was provided by Vice Chair Hatwig, who had first expressed the concern in sort of reopening this case and making movement on it. And this one was back from looking through our files. I found this one from 2014 as well. It shows what had happened, and the property had just been nominated or listed in 2004, so this was just 10 years after it had been designated. John, did you want to go into sort of
Sure.
a brief update?
Yeah.
I'll also open up the nomination, which shows some more photos along with an update made in 2016.
So at our last hearing, the update, or meeting, the update was that we were hoping to get permission to serve by publication, and we had gotten such permission. We had to run out a 30-day period to give the owner an opportunity to respond. She has not responded, and we had a hearing on September 10th. We were present. Chad Snyder from our office was present, but no one showed up on the defense side, and the minute order from that hearing indicates that, or requested that we file a default judgment to take back the property. So there is another hearing set for November 13, although it's possible that the court will simply accept our default filing even prior to then, and we'll move forward as quickly as we can once we have the default to do a levy procedure through the sheriff's office to retake title. So it looks like things are moving along, and this is the best situation, at least for now, to have the property as well as the cars, especially since the condition of them is not amazing. I think the prospect of trying to move them before they could be restored is not ideal, at least before there's a plan and funding and that sort of thing. So that's what I've got there, hopefully, but there's a chance that by the next meeting or that the city will have repossessed at that time, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
Any questions? So once the city takes possession, we own historically significant cars, then what? Or, do we have some leeway or latitude to do something with them? I mean, I don't think the city's in a restoration.
I think there are
type
people
of-
thinking about and working on this, but it's out of my hands, so to speak.
Yeah, that'll have to be determined. But I think the key thing at this point has been to make sure they're not further degraded and neglected. And then once the possession is kind of straightened out, then we can
Then would
work
city,
on a plan.
would city maintenance come in and just keep it up then?
I'm not sure. But I mean, they will be city property at the
Yeah.
end of this process if it goes the way it's looking. So then, yeah, that would be, then we'd be able to at least do a, kind of stabilize their situation, keep them
Do an
secured,
evaluation and-
right? And then see what we have before us.
I imagine if the city gets it to a certain point, they can almost essentially flip it as well, and there's probably quite a few potential buyers locally who have interest in it,
I'm
yeah.
aware of one person that had been interested at one point in the recent past.
Could you refresh my memory? Are they listed?
Yeah.
They are listed, so can they be moved if they're listed?
That would it would probably come to this, what's the listing? Do you remember? Is it the cars or how did we, it's just the cars, right?
I think we had this.
The cars are listed. Oh, did
Yeah,
you have the?
As artifacts, I
So the
believe.
land isn't
No, it's
part
not.
of the listing,
No,
it's
it's
just the cars?
No, but the cars became, from a legal standpoint, once they made the restaurant, and it doesn't take much to kind of make a little easy to remove foundation that makes, that makes a structure, a trailer or whatever legally considered part of the real estate. It's very, you could probably in an afternoon make turn a trailer into a building for legal purposes. So it's not much either way. If it was considered a significant change to a historic resource, it might have to come before the commission, but my guess is that it could probably be moved under Laura's authority, is my guess, but I don't think we'd have any controversy either way,
So
but.
Have
once
to
it
see.
was put on the foundation, it became a building on the property, and the
Yes.
property was subject to foreclosure,
Correct,
same as the building.
correct, yeah.
Well,
And so in theory, when the levy, and I guess I should go through the levy process. So just because we get a default, the default says we're owed $20,000. We immediately go to the sheriff and say, well, the way we'd like to collect this $20,000 is by taking back the property. They'll do their little investigations and pre-work, which is mostly just to make sure that there's not a dwelling on the property, because the levy process is considerably more difficult if it involves a residence. Even if there's no one there, and even if it's not owner occupied, it's still a big hassle, but it's not. So at that point, hopefully a sheriff's sale could be set, and then the city would be able to bid with whatever amount of money it has in its judgment, and then, so say it was 20,000, we'd be able to bid up to 20. To go beyond that, there would have to be new monies put in. But if somebody is willing to bid beyond that number, that's probably not a bad thing, because that would suggest that they might have some interest in
So
restoring.
it could be sold just in the sheriff's sale.
It
to somebody
could,
else.
it could. I mean, considering that it kind of got secretly, or not secretly, but just unceremoniously sold off for we think like 5,000 or less, not that, all that long ago. It'd be surprising if there was someone who came forward, but I think if someone came forward, it would hopefully be someone who was interested, but the discussions about how to deal with that are taking place, is my understanding.
Laura, can you scroll to what criteria this was nominated under?
1 and 3.
1 and 3, am I seeing that? Okay, there we go.
poetry crowd. I like that.
Well, it's good to finally see some action on this. I know we've had it out there, and sounds like this last month's been interesting on that one.
Do we
So
need
at
to
lea-
make any motions on this one, or is this is just an information only? You're not looking for any,
It was posted as a discussion item, so unless you feel the need to make an action,
Yeah, there's not really,
there's not really much to.
well, we didn't notice it as an action item either, so I think we'd have to, I'm not sure what the action item would be, though.
So,
Yes, Paul.
just kind of playing this out in the future, a good scenario might be somebody purchases these, moves them to a more prominent location and gives them a new life. If that were the case and they are listed, what latitude does that person have to change them to make them viable as whatever enterprise they choose to use them for?
As far as
That would have to
repurposing.
come to HPC if it's a substantial alteration that's being proposed. So it would be up to you all.
Yeah, so under the historic preservation ordinance, if they do a non-substantial, I don't know what that would be, have to put a couple signs in for code purposes or something small that didn't mess with it, then Laura could just approve that. But my guess is if there's any major thing, Laura's pretty conservative, tends to bring it to HPC, and so any major change is gonna come here.
But moving,
any
And how do we
modification
know
of-
that?
Yeah, I mean, any restoration process is gonna be
And there's not a,
major. There's not gonna surface
building
on those
permit,
things
is
that you
there?
couldn't touch.
Yeah, it's gonna
get
be
it
tough to fit
restored.
it in just a minute, or if anything major happens, I think it's probably coming here. And that would be a good thing.
Especially
That's a
a
good sign.
relocation,
I think-
because,
So I think it would be good if we could, once the city does gain control of it, if we could get access and do some more documentation, and maybe, a few of us out there while that happens, so we really kind of get a clear understanding of the condition that it's in, so that whoever purchases it, we've got a clear idea of the condition it is, and so when they're making proposals on what they'd like to do with it, we understand what that's gonna take and entail to do that. Because maybe they don't want to make it a dining car, maybe they want to make it library or something. There's got to be some wiggle room.
Or
to do
play
that.
space or anything, there's a number of
Yeah.
things they can add to it, yeah.
they're back in service.
We're back, that's right, throw it back on the rails.
Exactly. I would assume, once again, that maybe it's more of the exterior that we're concerned about, and probably less the interior. But it'd be good to know what that. Can't imagine the interior's like.
Well, I know at one point in the not too distant past, they caught on fire. So I can't imagine there's too much left inside anyway, having gone through that.
Yeah.
well, one thing it was significant for was its property type as a diner in the 20s and 30s, so that would, I would argue, relate to the interior if there is still any fabric left.
Bar stools and
And-
counters and.
Yeah,
I think the kitchen was detached somewhat,
That's what it said.
yeah.
so.
For something such as relocation, I'd probably want to bring it here, just because at least one of the cars has been here since 1936 at this location, and location was one of the aspects of integrity that was evaluated, so.
How many cars are there? Two. So obviously, we would have an issue too if someone wanted to purchase it and move it outside of City of Fresno altogether.
Not necessarily out of the question, just something that would need to come before you all for review. questions at this point?
Anyone else?
Not for me.
Okay. That concludes that item. There is no chairperson's report. Unscheduled items, members of the commission? Any unscheduled items?
Okay, I have this idea. I just took a look at the Fulton District app that was released 3 days ago. And it's very timely in that I'm teaching a class, CRM, and it's a service class. And the project that I thought up for the class was to do a web-based app on historic structures in Fresno, city of Fresno. And then I saw this, and I thought, uh-oh, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here. And I'm just curious to get thoughts about taking, have you seen that? Have you seen it?
The app?
Yeah, the
Oh, I
app.
have it, yeah.
Okay. So doing something similar, not necessarily having, all the shops, the restaurants, the everything, that it has, but taking that model and doing something similar for another district, let's say the Tower District. And I'm just wondering if that would be feasible, in that certainly I would need the assistance of the IT person who put that together. I wrote an email to Laura Gloria, and I haven't heard back from her. She's probably wondering, who is this weird person who's saying this, and this is going to make me have work, and I don't want to do that. But anyway, it's just a thought, and I want to know if you would support that.
Interesting, yeah. It was pretty involved to
Yeah.
put together that app.
Uh-huh.
So what I couldn't commit to is
Right.
resources being
Right.
devoted to that. I wouldn't want to, overcommit on that end. I love the idea, though, as a way to get excitement and interest, going over historic resources. And there has been some learning that took place, having put together one. So I'd imagine another one would be easier. But it's something that we'd be happy to look into and ask,
Yeah.
how tough is it now that there's sort of been a framework
Exactly.
created for it? Is it too hard to clone that for another neighborhood, or are you starting
Because
from
my
scratch?
students could provide, the meat of it, the data, the photos, the information. It's just then putting that into the structure. So, yeah.
Yeah, we could look into that and
Okay.
see what would be involved, and if it's no way, no how, or maybe if,
If they're willing to
that-
discuss it.
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And we could, take something very small and manageable. Just Tower District came to mind in that it's diverse, but,
Yeah.
anyway,
Is this
Huntington Boulevard Historic District.
yeah, yes. Yeah, that has
is this a
80-something.
Yeah,
The city-sponsored app?
yeah.
It's a mitigation measure, isn't it?
Mall.
What's it called, Dan?
It's just called Fulton District.
Yeah, you
so
look
if
it up
you
in your Play
go,
Store.
it's on Google Play, Apple App Store, and the icon, it's got a little green silhouette of Pacific Southwest building. See the bottom right-hand corner there?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, it's a really, really neat thing, and now that framework is there, so who knows? It might be doable, might
Okay.
not, but I'm happy to ask. And
Okay, great.
We can
I've got-
report back next month, maybe.
Sure, I've got 35 students that are
Ready to go?
ready to go.
That's cool. Can any of them write code?
Maybe a couple.
Is that, I'm sorry, I'm completely trying to catch up on this one. So your intent is just basically to take one of our existing districts
Mhm.
and basically
And basically
take
replicate.
the skeleton and populate it with the historic
Exactly.
district data?
Mhm.
And then how do you use that data in the app? Just finding stuff?
Yeah, it's,
Self-guided tour.
yes, exactly. You're somewhere and you say, okay, what's around me?
Right.
And it'll tell you how to get there, it'll tell you something about it, there's little Quizlets.
Can you dial a number and it gives the story, or, like the state park ones?
It doesn't have that,
Not yet.
but it has an awful lot of interpretive layers.
You can have links to our existing.
Oh, yeah. Exactly,
Page too that has all the
Mhm.
historical data.
true.
If they want to know deeper layers.
Yeah, for more, click
Right.
here, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, definitely take advantage of what's already existing, and not, as I said, reinvent the wheel.
Sure, sure.
And is it just a semester class?
Yes, it is, but
You're on a
I
timeline
have
as
it
well?
frequently, so it can be an ongoing thing.
Okay.
That's a fun idea.
Nice.
I like it.
Yeah. I was so, I mean, when I saw this thing, I heard about it when I was sitting in, I do in-house consulting at Caltrans. So I was sitting there in my boss's cubicle, and this guy came by and started talking about, oh, did you see the app? And I'm like, app, what? Fulton app? And I said, you like mobile? And he said, yeah. So today Laura showed me how to get there. And so I spent the afternoon going, wow.
Are you doing it in your classroom with your kids?
Yeah, I
Oh,
did. I went over it, because I first had to figure out how to show it on my computer. You have to put the special software that'll run a mobile app on your computer, Blue something or other. Anyway, so yeah, they thought it was cool. I thought it was cool.
It is cool.
I geeked out.
I love it. Love it. Awesome. Cue that one up. See what
Yeah.
we can do.
We'll check it out. Yeah.
Anything else?
In the meantime,
I've got a,
Yeah,
Yeah, no kidding.
yeah.
I've got a question, more of a clarification. I guess I'm trying to get it clarified. On the Mills Act, the 10-year contract, I understood that it was just exterior only, and I noticed that some of the owners have interior stuff like sanding the floors on the contract. Is that allowed, or is it, I'm a little confused here. I thought it was just exterior.
In general, it's always been exterior from the initial one's always been exterior paint, roof, porch, repointing. I haven't seen a lot of interior.
yeah, last year, all the improvement plans were exterior.
We have. I went with Laura, and there was probably two of the people that had, half of it was exterior.
Well, a lot of,
I mean, interior.
a lot of the people come with their, they come with their own list, but you can say, we're gonna scratch that, that's not, like, reseeding the lawn, like, no, that's not gonna,
Well, I guess what I'm saying is Laura and I discussed it, and she says that is the way it was done in other districts, that the interior was also allowed as an item on the contract. And I thought it was just strictly exterior. And I just need to get clarification on what is allowed and what isn't.
Right.
So, what I've been telling property owners is that we only require, inspection of the exterior of the property, but they have the option, if they would like to, include interior features. But it's certainly not required. And I think I discussed with Dan and another city I worked in with Mills Act. Well, also another factor here is that we're not charging an application fee for these inspections, but in another city, we would have like a flat fee to do the exterior requirements, and then we would charge an extra fee to do the interior if the property owner wanted to. And then, so I don't want to prevent property owners from wanting feedback on their interior rehabilitations if they want it. But I'm also open to discussing how we want to frame it moving forward.
So Laura, I'm confused. It sounds to me like you're saying you're okay that as we do inspections, we go in and look at the interior, but does that also follow then that they make application for interior repairs?
Not necessarily. Some people simply want to show off the interior of their homes, or perhaps seek advice on certain things. And some people actually need repairs within the interior of their homes and want feedback on that. But it's not necessarily a requirement. I think maybe a good example is saying, like, people will include paint as an exterior item on their Mills Act work plan, but that's not something we regulate. But it is something they can list
Right,
on their
but-
work plan.
But Ron, you're talking specifically about the 10-year schedule of
Yes.
improvements, right? That would be.
We got 1 year, we got the
that they
paint the
commit to
exterior.
be doing.
2 year,
Right.
we're gonna paint the interior trim. 3 year, we're gonna sand the floors.
Mm-hmm.
4th year, we're gonna replace the bathroom shower,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I thought this was just exterior that we were concerned with.
So it's a
Well-
financial issue, is that right? It's the, they're getting relief from from tax. That's basically public money they're getting to spend on the inside of their house. Is that your point?
Yes.
And you're, I guess following that out, to be
We have no
listed-
jurisdiction on the inside
Well,
of the
to be
house.
listed, it's about the exterior, it's not about the interior, is that right? So there's an incongruousness there that
Yes.
you're pointing out.
Yes.
But are they really I think that the evaluation that staff and that HPC is gonna be doing as far as whether they approve these Mills Act contracts is whether you feel that it's appropriate based upon the criteria. And to some degree, it seems like if they're putting interior stuff, it's almost kind of just piling on a little bit. Now, and in some ways, they're probably hurting themselves a little bit because they're putting these legally binding things regarding the interior that they don't really need to put in there. Now, I don't know if it may be just kind of totally superfluous, because what is the likelihood that the city is going to be enforce interior changes? Because obviously, we ultimately would enforce exterior, if they were not in compliance with their exterior promises, be subject to enforcement, but the interior, but it does raise some interest.
Well, the you know, the basic idea is that, you know, you're getting a benefit from the public in the form of lower taxes, and the idea is that the public gets something in return, right? So, you know, when we did the 4 homes, or the four buildings in one commercial building last year, for those of you that went along with me on those, we steered people to the exterior because that's what the public is able to enjoy. And so if the public's gonna basically subsidize improvements, let's focus it on areas that the public can enjoy from the public way. However, there were, I can't remember which one it was, but there were a few that were not really visible from the street or the sidewalk, but they were important to keeping the building structurally sound. And so the group was comfortable with approving those sorts of things. But someone actually brought up like, hey, kitchen remodel. And, you know, we said, well, no, you know, you could do that if you want, but we're not going to put it on this schedule of improvements as what you're
See, that's
you're
what I
really
understood,
funding
too.
with the, so what I would suggest, these have to be approved by the commission and forwarded to the director for recommendations. So we might want to, you know, when they come through, you know, whatever the property owner is suggesting doesn't have to just be rubber stamped. There's some give and take there. You all need to feel like, you know, the public is getting something for their money, you know, and it is important to the preservation of the structure and, you know, a good use of the funds.
So on the subject of give and take, it seems to me there is no give and take on whether or not a structure is meritorious of being listed in the first place. It's about the exterior. You can say, hey, I've got this gorgeous stair inside, doesn't matter. So it seems to me that there should be a connection between the Mills Act criteria and the register criteria. And to get into this sort of freestyling of what a group thinks, I think that's a slippery slope. I kind of agree. It ought to be consistent with requirements to make the list in the first place.
That's my whole point.
I think that's a good point.
There's some discretion involved, and that would be a use of your discretion to.
I think it's great the guy wants to sand his
Yeah.
floors and refinish them, but
But the public doesn't get to go in and see his beautiful new floor.
no, we're responsible and for the exterior, since it's historic property, that's what I thought the Mills Act was part of, is keeping the exterior historical value good.
You can have a historic interior though, can you not, that's registered?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so if
Yeah,
you're,
Or of a couple, usually, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not common, but yeah.
so I guess the point is that the criteria.
Courthouses sometimes have historic, interiors and.
In that case, the criteria would include the interior, and if that was a Mills Act project, then interior's fine, but if you get listed because you've got a beautiful Victorian facade, and that's why you got listed, I don't think you can benefit from the public to
You have to look at it too from like, if it's a restaurant or something like that, the restaurant does have an interior public space.
Right.
Well,
Oh, sure, it's
the-
public access.
The one I can think of that would be the interior too would be like the Mukes home,
Yeah,
but that's part of the
that's
register.
part of the register.
We're concerned with the exterior, that's our jurisdiction is the exterior. We don't have any jurisdiction on the inside of the house. We can't go in and say you gotta replace that with.
In most cases.
We would if that was part of the,
Right.
part of
But
the,
by the same token, we don't typically have jurisdiction on other than street fronts. And we are certainly approving Mills Act items on all four sides of the exterior.
True.
It's a gray area. I mean, there's some discretion that,
That's why I
that
say
we'll
it's
have to use.
optional. It's not required, the interiors. Maybe if it were a property that like definitively had the interior not like nominated,
But if-
we
but
would
if-
require it, but
But if you say it's not required, it means, it infers that it's perfectly acceptable to include on your line items the interior. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it acceptable or is it not acceptable?
Right. I mean, I think you guys, both of you have basically teased out the point. It depends upon the listing and what it's listed for. And we could probably legally stand on that too, if someone wanted to, fight back and say, I'm doing this amazing staircase and yada, 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 and you could say you're not listed for that staircase, that might be something we can, but we might wanna clarify that, so that
That's my hope.
applications are,
People
that
know
it's
going in.
understood that,
Yeah.
because I think what you're saying is that the Mills Act program doesn't necessarily tease that out, but we might want to clarify that in
So-
what we're funding,
would that
essentially.
encourage more people to include interiors on their applications? And maybe preserve more interiors?
It helps them set and establish goals
Yeah.
for their
true,
own
it could be
personal
another
goals.
factor if the process becomes competitive.
Like the Wilson Island, that's a district, and from what I understand, it's strictly exterior facade on all the houses. I'm just trying to get clarification here because it fights one another.
Sure.
Well, I think people need, hopefully they're understanding that the commission is looking at it from a public benefit and a preservation of publicly acknowledged historic resources and that sort of thing. If we get to a situation where people think that they have a perfectly good exterior, but then they think, well, I can get on the Mills Act so that it will help me with my interior only, then those are where the gray areas.
People are people.
Because you're looking,
That'll happen.
because you're looking, ultimately, we're looking to not just help people who buy a home, but to incentivize preservation. So it's gonna be hopefully, mostly homes or buildings or that they're undertaking it somewhat in the hope of taking advantage of the designation. Yes, Paul?
I think Robin,
Oh,
go ahead.
Laura, have you had a chance to go back? Is there any wording in the Mills Act, I don't recall, about exteriors primary or exteriors only, or is it completely not stated? Is that why we're having the conversation?
I don't think it's stated, and I think go ahead.
So on that point, you talked about incentivizing preservation. Are we trying to incentivize preservation of exteriors or interiors?
Right.
Or buildings in their total? What are we,
I think the latter, I mean,
Well, if that's the case, if we do the insides preservation, you couldn't put a new stove in it.
I think we have to use a
Not being
case-by-case judgment on this when we review this. There's something about incentivizing for people to restore, and oftentimes they go together.
Well, to be clear, I don't think anyone's talking about regulating the inside, because what usually is,
Right.
it's like, I promise I'm gonna do these 10 things on this schedule, and so it would be like, well, I'm gonna, replace this amazing hearth that is somewhat visible from the road, then maybe you'd say, okay, that's something. If it's redoing some floor thing, you might say, well, let's just cross that off. That's not, but hopefully you're doing other things to
You
compensate.
can also
Well, and I-
incentivize and say, 80% has to be towards
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
historic
yeah, I
theme,
like that.
20%
Yeah.
to.
I think it's a matter of priority.
Yes.
Show us that your priority is the exterior for the public good. And then, because you got that help, now you're a little freer to go do what you want on the inside.
Because nobody would take a roof that needs to be done and only do the ones that's facing the public. You do a roof job.
I mean,
And that's,
it's a bit of a gray area, and I think it's important that for, you all to retain a little bit of discretion to be able to look at homes case by case. I mean, I could see some historic interiors, something on the lines of the Mukes home coming in. You know what? We want to subsidize those kinds of improvements. We want to encourage that regular house that has a great exterior, but it's a private residence, maybe not. And the discussion really isn't what's allowed, because all kinds of things are allowed, right? I mean, we've seen entire interiors completely gutted down to the studs and modernized, but the exterior looks amazing. And hey, yeah, that's actually allowed, right? But what are you willing to pay for? What are us as a community willing to pay for? That's really the discussion. We're giving them a tax break that the public should be getting, and they're gonna get that money instead to improve the structure. So we as a community are in effect paying for those improvements. What are we willing to pay for? That's really what it boils down to. They could do any number of things. They could put in a pool, they could, redo their kitchen with the, industrial stove and all that, but is that a good use of these funds for the preservation of the structure? That's really what it boils down to, and so that should really be the focus. But I think, we've heard some good direction here, and I think that, Laura can work with the applicants to, if there's any fine tuning that needs to happen on their proposed 10-year schedule of improvements to head more in the direction that you guys are talking about before it comes to you. I think she'd be able to do that. And then at the meeting, when you guys are considering it, you can also suggest or require for your approval them to make changes, right then and there. Hey, you know what? I see that, you've got this historic staircase, but we're worried about that porch. And we want that staircase to come off of year 3, and we want the porch there instead. And if you can't commit to that property owner, then we don't have to approve your contract. And there's, that can happen there too. But I think the direction is pretty clear, the general direction, and I think Laura can work with folks. If any of them need a little bit of tightening up or slight modifications to reflect what you're saying, you think that that's a doable thing? Yeah.
And I think everyone's on the same page, working with the applicants. They all know that the exterior is the focus, that the historic character is the focus, and they're well aware of, how the process needs to go. And most people, or I would say everyone has most of their items as exterior. So it's just a few people who might have a few interior items that do involve historic features on the interior.
You and I looked at the Manny Mullen property. I would say half of the stuff on his was interior. At least half of it. Now, he needed a new roof, he was gonna paint. But that was about it. Replace a couple,
Yeah,
cheap exterior doors.
windows and doors as well. But yeah, maybe half, and that
Well, 50% of it
he's
was-
definitely the outlier among all of our
Yeah,
Middlesex
because none of the ones
applicants.
that we looked at had
We never went, yeah, we
interior.
didn't go in any interiors.
So part of the process then needs to be if the people that are signing up for it don't completely understand, then we need to educate and guide them in directions so that they understand what's going on.
Right, we're under no obligation to approve their first proposal.
No, absolutely
Right.
not. And we want to make sure that they understand, you know, if they don't understand the purpose of it and why it's this way, we need to make sure that they do understand that. If we can swing them around and get them on board with that, they'll probably change their, I mean, you know, with a new program, understanding a different program, you're gonna provide different solutions.
Well, and it could just be a matter of trimming too, because Jason, I think you and I did the one in Wilson Island,
Yeah,
right?
we
And-
trimmed a lot.
Yeah, and they had really piled a lot in there. And if you think about the dollar amount of what they'd be saving in their taxes versus what they were proposing in this first draft of their 10-year plan, they were gonna spend way more than they were gonna get back. But in going through it, some of it was, you know, backyard kind of stuff. And it was maybe some historic flat work or whatnot, but no, that's not what we're focused on here. Or there was some work in the kitchen. No, that's not where we're focused here. So after trimming some of that stuff out, you still had a really great catalog of exterior projects that gave us more than our money's worth. I don't know about the mini Wawa house, but if you just got the interior stuff out, it could be that exterior list that remains without adding anything new might be sufficient, or it might not. You guys might want to suggest adding some things in, but in that case, it was just a matter of trimming out some of the stuff that didn't fit, but they still had a remaining list that was spot on.
That brings up another question, like the mini Wawa house, they're gonna have to put a new roof on, they had the shakes. Could that be extended for 2 years? Because that's gonna be an expensive project. You know,
Listed as a 2-year project.
so could that be put under 2 years or even 3?
Yeah, it can be a year range as well, not
This
just
is gonna
1
probably
year.
cost $50,000 to
Well,
replace the roof on that house.
If you recall, that's definitely within the realm of possibility, and it's there's precedent locally with our one-year-old program, because if you recall, the Rowell Building went through Mills Act, and they're undergoing a $24 million restoration right now, and so year one was full restoration, and then year 2 through 10 was maintain as needed, right? There were other projects that had every year, there was a menu of a couple of items that they
Yeah.
were going to do. So it ran the gamut in that way, and so someone like the folks on Mini Wawa, we're gonna do a big project on year 2, maybe year 3 and 4 are just maintained as needed, and then year 5, there's another big project. That's absolutely doable.
That's acceptable, but I didn't want, I didn't want interior to be at least half the focus and not have the rest of it.
Yeah, last year when we walked, we automatically, with the owner, said, hey, these are non-qualifying. And there were some that were, you could squeeze it in as qualifying, but there was like a fence, that wasn't part of the original. But it was certainly something that there's a couple items like that where like, that doesn't qualify. So,
Yeah, so it's,
the owners, they don't know, and so we'd ask them to develop a wish list, essentially, of all the things that they would like to do, to be excited about it, to get maybe a tour of their home with their friends, or a bike ride thing that we do here at the city, or something, so they get jazzed about it, but yeah, they often have to go, wow, that's not gonna be the best of your dollar spent.
Yeah, Laura's almost done with the inspections, and thanks to all of you that have helped her with those. And once, I think there's just 2 more left, right? So once those are done, and we can look at those and see if any of them, we need to get back with any of the folks and say, hey, before we take it to the commission, we think maybe this needs to come out, or whatever, and fine tune it a little bit, and.
Or we can just discuss it on a case-by-case basis next month, with each project.
So Laura, I have a question. You mentioned in case this gets competitive. What does that look like? Is there a certain dollar amount with the county that we're held to each year, or what would we hope to have competitive someday look like?
Yeah, I'm not certain about that.
You haven't seen the situation.
Well, we lose a little revenue, right, with each one of these.
Yeah.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot, and I think it's more than worth it. However, gosh, if we started getting a flood of 50 applications a year, we might want to say, whoa, we don't have the staff resources to process that many.
So there's no
You guys don't
amounts,
want to
so-
have 30 meetings a year to go over these things, right? So we might want to limit it to 20, right? Just for bandwidth purposes. And in that case, if you're getting 50 applications and only 20 slots, you're going to have to make it competitive. And so then you're gonna want to score it based on the merits of what they're proposing, the merits of the building, all of that, and I think they would come in play in that kind of scenario.
I think the city of LA has a
They
thing
do.
where it's like they take their cumulative loss and they want to keep it at around like $2 million per year or something like that, which it's a little bit arbitrary because it's kind of like, well, but they might not have done the improvement raising the property value but for it. And I think for them, if I remember my research correctly, they've gotten to the point where commercial buildings are not considered quite as often, multifamily not considered quite as often.
So income generating property.
Yeah, so anything like, so they're mostly single family. Those aren't hard and fast rules, and they have a competitive process. I do believe they charge a fee. So that would be, I don't know that if theirs is successful or whatever, but it's utilized a lot.
Yeah, I'd love that problem where it's,
right.
that we'll have so many people wanting.
Right.
And I mean, one thing we do have to be careful of is, you have like a Huntington district, having some sort of uniformity in what qualifies, that way neighbors aren't like, well, they didn't give you the staircase, I got mine, just being uniform and in specific places, especially districts, because neighbors are neighbors and they're gonna compete in another
Right.
way. So being consistent with districts is definitely, I think, something we need to be aware of. Yeah.
Thanks for that direction. I think that was a helpful conversation.
The question.
Thanks for the question,
So we'll look at that once they're all in and.
I just couldn't see, I thought the Mills Act was strictly exterior, but that's why I wanted clarification.
Perfect.
I had a question last year, when the Mills Act applications were brought to HPC. Was it one big discussion around all of the properties? Or so you didn't just go like property by property, it was just one overall discussion among?
It was all at one
among-
meeting.
Right, all at one meeting, but
We
was
looked
it
at
all
them
one
individually,
item?
But my recollection is we voted as a group.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
Okay.
Amber, does that sound right?
So I wasn't here during the earliest part, and Laura wasn't here yet, right?
No.
But
Wasn't either.
as I recall, I was here Amber was here, for sure. And you were here before I was here too, in these meetings. But I remember all four of them were voted on the same day. I mean,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah,
wasn't,
That's
Same
true.
action
The
and
sa-
one
Were they voted on individually or?
I
as
think,
a-
I think we voted as a group, but
well,
Like
but
one
you'd have the power to have, that would be up to the chair
were
and
new
the
at it
folks
too.
to
We can
pull
do-
it out. The key is that they were all, that all the information was there, it was the same meeting, and so in the minds of the commission, you'd have the ability to kind of, without necessarily having to formalize any rules, but have the ability to kind of think about consistency, since they were all presented at the same time and voted. But you'd have the ability to pull any out or individually consider. I don't think there's any, I think you have total freedom as far as that goes and as far as how you'd like to consider that, at least at this point. I feel like if we start imposing rules, that's kind of a good thing. That means that we're having a really successful program.
Anything else? I have one thing to state, with the Armenian Historic District Subcommittee got some information from John earlier today. We've all read that. I think we're kind of forming some questions
Okay.
between each other, and we'll hopefully kick that back to you.
Yeah, and I can, if you ever want to meet or have a discussion or whatever,
Okay.
we'll do that whenever.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of processing what you gave us, and we'll determine if we need that meeting, or just kick those questions back to you and see what you think. We'll put that together, but we got information, we're moving forward on it.
Cool.
Yeah. Staff, unscheduled items?
I have an announcement. Last Thursday, City Council disapproved the nomination for the Herndon Station Control Building.
That you said disapproved?
Yeah. Councilmember
Yeah.
Brandow, who represents the district that the building is in, made the motion to put it on the local register, but he didn't get a second.
I was gonna ask what kind of a vote it was.
Yeah.
I wonder what, that seems like an easy thing.
The discussion, you might want to look at the tape, which is online, but the discussion really revolved around property rights and the ability of the company to do what they felt they needed to do with the land.
So, the owners were not in favor, like,
Right.
okay.
Right. Yeah, and they
They were in favor when they were here, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they loved the building and everything, but it was smack dab in the middle of the way. I
They
mean,
stated it was a problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they during public comment, they had a representative that spoke and requested that it not be put on the register.
I'm not too surprised by
They probably got that.
So is,
that. I see that one coming a mile away.
The only
is a
thing,
demo permit there next
did
door?
they reapply yet or no?
Is it already down?
No, it's not down.
They have not
No.
reapplied.
So they actually,
They have not reapplied yet.
withdrew their demo permit application prior to the meeting. Presumably that was some sort of political move or something like
Really?
that. The city had taken the position, I guess I should update a little bit, because prior to the vote,
Good point, yeah.
the city had taken, sorry, right, when was it? Maybe August 28th, we got a letter from PG&E Council stating that the city had no jurisdiction over their property, so it doesn't matter what you do, but we want you to stop what you're doing. And so we researched it a little bit, some back and forth. My view, although I would not say it was a 100% conclusion, I was hoping to tease out some more information from the PG&E Council, which we never really got. But our view was that we did have jurisdiction to put it on the local register, because although in some cases utilities are under the sole jurisdiction of state regulatory bodies, like for example, if we couldn't tell them how to construct their power transmission lines or something, we wouldn't be allowed to put on some rule on that, and that's heavily litigated a lot of times, because people say, oh, well, we're worried about interference or that sort of thing, or having power lines too close to this and that. The municipalities always lose those arguments every time. They say it's the PUC's jurisdiction, has nothing to do with the city. Our position, and I'm gonna continue feeling that this is right, is that PG&E does not have just carte blanche to do whatever they want with historic resources that are not connected with their power transmission or generation thing, or core functions. So, I don't know, they basically said that it didn't matter, but we still want you not to designate it, because if it truly didn't matter, then we'd designate it, and then they'd just go to PUC and get a permit and whatever. So they seemed concerned about it for some reason, but then they won politically, so it did not get designated. There is not a new demo permit.
But we anticipate one will be forthcoming.
And it's still a little strange of a position for PG&E to be in, because they never reneged on their belief that we don't have jurisdiction. So if they reapply for the demo permit, they're being a little inconsistent. And hopefully if if there are other agencies involved that are supposed to have jurisdiction, that they don't just come to us, get the stamp to destroy it, and then someone comes back and says, oh, well, should have gone to the air board, or you should have gone to the Public Utilities Commission to get the permit. We'll say, well, we,
Straight to SHPO.
not our yeah, and the fact of the matter is, if something's not on the historic register, we have no, it's a ministerial process, there's no CEQA, there's no nothing. It can just go. So that's how we are.
Any state involvement that's possible?
Well, they said, maybe PUC has some jurisdiction over his potential historic resources. I don't know. I didn't find anything in that, in my research, trying to see whether they had a jurisdiction argument. I didn't, although permits that get submitted, permit applications that get submitted to PUC sometimes do discuss historic resources. It wasn't clear that PUC considers that part of their jurisdiction or not, so. Yeah, I don't know. My non-legal advice is that I don't think it's very likely that anything's going to get approved over the objection of the property owner in the current.
Right, discussions last Thursday didn't even get to the argument of jurisdiction. It just was cut off at the issue of private property rights, so.
And PG&E is the least private of a private property owner, and they still won on that argument, so. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll certainly update you if there's a permit application, but we can't hold an emergency HPC meeting or anything to do anything about it.
Well, it's a done deal anyway, right?
Yeah, as long if they fill out the application and are willing to pay to do it.
Well, I mean, the city council has already
Cit-
spoken.
The only thing that the city, so now the HPC is actually prohibited under the code from re-recommending it. The only way,
it could come, no.
yeah, the council would have to do it on its own to do anything about it, which is not very likely.
We don't have a great track record on owners that don't want a list.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
So that was the sad news. Good news is the Mills Act program is trucking along well. Thank you for the discussion tonight. We just have 2 more site visits to conduct, and then we'll start preparing for next month's HBC.
Oh, and I probably should say, you'll see on the if you look at the September 27th city council meeting, there is this is not directly HPC related, but maybe of interest. The owners of the Hotel Fresno project are seeking an amendment to their owner participation agreement with the successor agency to the redevelopment agency, which is the city. And so that, we already have the recommendation for the National Register designation, but the current project is in serious jeopardy of failing and having the current folks get foreclosed out. They have requested that the project be altered a little bit, and they think they can make it and get the appropriate financing in place by the end of the year. And they're putting a proposal to council on Thursday. I think it's likely to get continued till October 11th, but it'll be interesting to see if anything moves on the Hotel Fresno project. But nothing for HPC yet on that.
No, my memory serves me right. They've had dollars set aside already for that project awarded to them.
The city's commitment is in place as long as the owners perform.
Right, and so, right, well, for quite a few years has just sat idle, even with dollars backing it, it's gone nowhere.
I would say that they have not come up with money to make it pencil out yet.
Okay, gotcha.
The financing. What, the change that occurred was that the prior project, the idea was to do a mixed project that was basically half lower income of various AMI levels and then half market rate. And that, the folks who looked into it decided that that's infeasible to do that under the current market conditions in downtown. So their proposal includes converting it to 100% affordable, although the half that's going to be affordable is 80% of AMI. So some people say that's not really that different because the market would probably dictate about those rent levels anyway, although it is a 55-year covenant that will make it remain low income. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Working hard to see if we can make this thing pencil out, move forward.
We have no general public. So we can adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting is October 22nd.
Gotta
very
put
much.
some
Thank you.
crazy things on the agenda to draw out the public.